And next up will be Britt van Zelst, who is an enthusiastic MSc student from the Netherlands with a great passion for beavers. She's currently setting up a research plan combining natural and social scientific approaches to study beavers in the Netherlands. Essentially, she advocates for a future in which beavers and humans can thrive together in a sustainable way. Thank you, Britt, so much for making the travel over, and here we are. Welcome, Britt, to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Welcome for attending my talk. So I'm here today, and I wanted to share with you guys the case of beavers in the Netherlands, because I think this whole conference is about sharing knowledge and learning from each other. And I've already seen that the beavers in the Netherlands are different from the beavers here in the United States. So I'll be talking about the lessons we've learned with our experience with beavers in the Netherlands, and about the lessons that we will still have to learn. So I would like to start with introducing this guy right here. This is Basje, little boss, and I want to start with him because he's been with me since the beginning as well. This is me like 10, 15 years ago. Basje is pretty old, for a beaver especially. He's 23. He's quite nervous, a little shy. I don't think he'll say much today, but that's what I'm here for. So this is me now. I'm a master's student. I'm almost graduating my master in forest and nature conservation, and I'm specialized in water quality and aquatic ecology. And I'm doing my studies in Wageningen. I don't know if you guys know that, but it's quite a famous university in the Netherlands at least. And I'm representing the Dutch Institute for Ecology right here. I'm a guest researcher there, and I just submitted a research proposal on beavers in the Netherlands, and I'm still waiting to hear whether I get that position or not. But still, I thought this would be a great opportunity to learn some more about beavers. So let me introduce to you the Netherlands. For those that don't know, it's right there. Very small country. I've been told that the Netherlands is about the size of Florida, so you guys have a little bit of an idea what the size of the Netherlands is. I'm from, let's see if I can use this pointer. I'm from this area right here. And what is good to know about the Netherlands is that our country is very flat. We have some mountains, or I think you guys would consider it hills, in the south. But the rest of the Netherlands is quite flat, actually. But we're very densely populated. I just looked it up, and it's about 13,000 people per square mile. So you have an idea about that. And the Netherlands are known for their battle against water. So we have the water coming from two sides. They are coming from the sea, so the North Sea on the left, and we have the rivers coming from Europe, because the Netherlands is basically the drain of Europe. So yeah, we know how to fight the water, because without our damming, our dikes, everything, the Netherlands would look like this. And we don't, so we're quite successful in protecting ourselves against the water. However, we're also dealing with climate change. So this was in the southern of the Netherlands last year. So we might need to have a few adjustments. And this is where most of our protection comes from. So you see the canals that we've dug, you see the dikes that we've made, and the rivers, how we structured them to make sure that we know what to do in times of flooding. I think it's quite clear that our water management structures are of major importance for us. But now I need to get you to the beaver. Now that you know the context of the Netherlands, I would like to go through the history of the beaver in the Netherlands, with first the past, when they were reintroduced. Then I would like to go on to the present, where we are right now, where we are dealing with the ecosystem services and disservices of beavers. And I would like to show you guys my view on the future, where hopefully we'll have a happy human-beaver coexistence. So let me start in the past. So like many other countries, the beaver was completely extinct because of hunting for their fur, but also in the Netherlands, people thought that beavers ate fish. So they hunted them down to make sure that they didn't compete with our fisheries. So they went extinct in 1826, and then there was a long period of beaver absence until they were reintroduced again. But in the meantime, there was major developments in terms of agriculture, urbanization, infrastructure. All these things were made in absence of beaver. And then they were reintroduced. So they were reintroduced originally in one quite big nature reserve, and they were reintroduced in some others as well. What is good to know, we don't have the American beaver, we have the European beaver, the castor fever. And although they are native to the Netherlands, they don't have a natural predator anymore. We've recently reintroduced the wolf, but I think we have like 3 or 4. And we have like 5,000 beavers now. So that's not really doing something. So besides us humans, they don't really have natural predators. And we wanted them to stay kind of in these natural reserves. But like you all know, the beaver does what it wants. So it's now also increasingly colonizing agricultural and even urban areas. So I'd like to show you the spread of the beaver in the Netherlands. So in the red areas, those are mainly the locations where they were reintroduced. And then you see how the population basically exploded. And this is where we are right now. Beavers basically everywhere. And as you can see on these 2 maps, on the left is the beaver distribution right now, and on the right you see the land use. I also just looked it up because everyone was asking me, like, what do the beavers eat in the Netherlands? I don't think you guys have a lot of forest. That's true. We have about 11% forest cover, but most of it is agriculture. But as you can see, the beaver doesn't mind. He comes everywhere, not just in natural areas, not just forests, but also agricultural and urban areas. So I've heard some of you already touch upon this in your presentations, but I wanted to highlight what ecosystem services are. So ecosystem services are beneficial things we can get out of nature. It can be instrumental, so for example with the fur trade, but it can also be other things like experiencing nature and having a great feeling with that. And beavers also have plenty of ecosystem services. Oh, I wasn't showing this one. Okay. Well, these are the different ecosystem services that there are, but you probably know these already. So this brings me to the benefits of beavers. I listed a few of them which occur in the Netherlands, but I bet there's plenty of more. So they have good effects on nature development and restoration. They take care of tourism, water retention, they improve water quality. These are all amazing things that are related to their ecosystem engineering. So these are beaver pictures of the Netherlands. In the middle you see a beaver dam. That's quite rare in the Netherlands, but I have found a picture of it. But usually they just build lodges and they dig holes like on the pictures below. Oh, I should point like this, like that. But the beaver is not the only ecosystem engineer in the Netherlands, because we are too. And when our plans do not match with those of the beaver, you sometimes have these ecosystem disservices that I talked about, or the drawbacks of the beaver. And these disadvantages are societal. So the drawbacks of the beaver can be categorized into 3 categories. So the main thing is damage by eating or gnawing. On this picture right here, this is quite an interesting case. I talked to a few about this already, but these are trees, really big beeches near a castle that is like a cultural heritage of the Netherlands. And up to this point, we didn't really know that beavers would go for beach until they ruined a few weeks ago like 6 trees like this. So the castle and the people around it were not really happy with that. But they also feed on the crops of the farmers, which they don't like. And yeah, you can see on the bottom, paths are falling, and they are digging holes in our dikes, which obviously destabilizes them, and that is something we're not happy about. So because of that, we have problem beavers. That's what they call them, probleembeavers. And they've been getting on the news recently quite a lot. I just took a bunch of titles. So here you have a problem beaver that was shot, or ProRail, which is like the train station, is looking for a beaver that dig a tunnel. Many, many things, a lot of damage, more and more in the news. I won't translate all of them, but you get the point, I think. So now we have the present. So we have, on one hand, we have the ecosystem services that we're very happy about, where it's improving the biodiversity with the related positive effects for ourselves. But as you can also see, you don't really want to have this beaver burrow in our dike, which is not safe. So therefore, we need to find ways to coexist. And in my opinion, first of all, we need to research a bit more, because there's simply too much we don't know yet about what is happening with these beavers in the Netherlands. So with that, I had, I think, a nice illustration. So if you consider the ecosystem engineering skills of both people and beavers in the Netherlands, in the past we were here. We were the strong ones. We decided to reintroduce the beaver. We were like, there is the nature, you should go there. But the beaver was stronger than that. He's colonizing outside of the areas. So we were kind of scared that they're gonna beat us in the ecosystem engineering contest. But for the future, I'd rather see this as a more collaborative thing rather than a contest. So this is my view of the future. So for that, in order to reach that future, I think we need research. The research that I submitted is entitled Beavers in Anthropogenic Landscapes, a Blessing or a Burden, in which I basically would like to research what are the effects of beavers in the Netherlands, and how do we envision a future in which humans and beaver can thrive in coexistence. And I think it's very important to envision that future so that we have something that we can work towards. Beavers are not the only animals that this is applicable to, because in a crowded world, people and wildlife are competing for resources in space, and not just beavers. So these are a few examples of human-wildlife conflicts, or probleembeavers, problem beavers, around the world. And I think we should move away from this human-wildlife conflict idea, but we should go towards human-wildlife coexistence. But what does that look like? I was able to shock you with these human-wildlife conflicts, but I can't really show you what it looks like if humans and wildlife are happily thriving in coexistence. So therefore I made this image. This is my view on the future with humans and beavers in the Netherlands. So as you can see, we've protected our cultural trees, we've protected our dikes, but some trees the beaver can easily take down. So yeah, this is like a summary. But in order to get there, these are the research goals that we need to get. So we need to know what are the impacts of beavers on nature and society in the Netherlands. Simply because most of the research that is done is here in the States, in Canada, Sweden, those countries that are maybe in some parts are similar to the Netherlands, but many things are different. So it's quite good to know whether these effects also apply in the Netherlands. And then the second question would be, what does a sustainable human-beaver coexistence look like, and how should we get there? This, in my opinion, requires an inter- and transdisciplinary approach in which both ecological and social scientists, but also stakeholders, play an important role. And one of the frameworks that I would like to use for this is the Nature Futures framework. So the Nature Futures framework is like a foundation for developing futures scenarios, positive future scenarios for nature. And the most important thing about this is that it re-evaluates our values of nature. What we often think about is nature increasing biodiversity, or nature giving us food in terms of resources. But there's many other ways in which you can value nature, and this framework distinguishes 3 ways. So first of all, you have the nature for nature, where it's about the intrinsic value. So then we're talking about how nature, or beavers, for example, can enhance biodiversity. And then you have the nature and society, the instrumental value of beavers. For example, would be their fur, or their effect on water quality, or like these ecosystem services that I mentioned. And then lastly, which is I think the most difficult one, is nature as culture, where it's about the relational value. And then we're talking about, for example, the beaver as an icon for nature conservation. Or, for example, I don't know how that is here, but in the Netherlands, in many nature reserves, we have these visitor centers, and then almost everywhere there's an image of the beaver and some information about all the good things that he's doing. And I think that's also a great value, and also like kids wanting to explore nature, see a beaver, like the wonderful things about the beaver that you don't necessarily immediately think of, those are part of nature as culture. And another thing that I think is important is to measure this at different spatial scales. Because, for example, in the Netherlands, we have a big problem with water quality, similar as to the Chesapeake Bay, I think. And we measure this in the big rivers, but we don't really measure this in the small creeks. And I think the effects of beavers may be observable in the small creeks, but maybe not in the big rivers. So I suggest to investigate the effects of beavers on multiple scales. So I would suggest to start at the local habitat, and then go to a slightly bigger water body scale, and then look at landscape scale, whether or not they have effects. Let me see. So first of all, I think it's important to look at the present situation and see whether the things we expect of beavers, the things that are always said, whether they also apply in the Netherlands. And I think I can do that by involving stakeholders, asking them what they see in the field. Do they really observe these effects, and to what extent? And then based on that, we can envision a future. So I wanted to show you this image. I really like this one. So you have it's a hiker, and he wants to go to the end of the horizon. But what's in the middle, he doesn't know. So first of all, it's important to see where he is now, what is in the present. Then he envisions a future, like where he wants to go. And as soon as he gets that, then he can figure out the middle part. So yeah, that was more about the social part. And then the more ecological part, I wonder to what extent are the effects of beavers as keystone species or ecosystem engineers applicable in the Netherlands. So this is a Dutch image, but it's probably applicable here as well. But is it also here? I have no idea. I really don't know. We have to share the landscape with the beaver. We have a growing human population. We have a growing beaver population. So it's good to investigate whether these effects also apply in certain areas. You might not expect them. And then another ecosystem service of beavers is their effect on water quality and water quantity. But in my view, I think these are often related to their damming. And like I said, the beavers don't dam as much in the Netherlands as they do here. We have a few, but not as many. This is another rare one. You can see how natural that stream is. not at all. But yeah, I was wondering, like, to what extent do these beavers enhance water quality, enhance water quantity in systems that are so much in control by us people? And then lastly, I would like to discover this middle part that I was talking about. So we know the present, we know the future we want to work towards, and then it's important to, in collaboration with stakeholders, find pathways to get to that future. Like, how do you envision it, and what are options? But we don't know. That's also why I'm here. I'm open for ideas, but I think it's good to have a map in which you can see optimal, suitable, potential or unsuitable beaver locations, and then have methods to either facilitate them in the areas that are optimal or potential, and repel them in the unsuitable beaver locations. And then hopefully we'll end up here. So I would like to highlight here, these are a lot of stakeholders. It's all Dutch organizations, so I won't go into depth, but I just wanted to highlight how many organizations are involved and how many people you should talk to, because I think that is the key towards a sustainable human-beaver coexistence. So with that, it's my take-home message. It would be, if you want to achieve a human-beaver coexistence, it should be based on knowledge that is applicable. It should be publicly supported, and I think that's what makes it sustainable and therefore successful in the future. Thank you.
We actually have time for questions, so let's do it.
Hi, thanks. In the States, we tend to put the Room for the River program in the Netherlands on a pretty high pedestal for nature-based solutions for flooding. And I'm curious whether beaver have been incorporated into any projects, or whether you, if not, do you see a future for beaver to be included in future Room for the River projects?
Yeah, they definitely are. Most of the beaver habitat is in these Room for the River projects, so they're often in the areas that are flooded in case of high water level. So whenever they need more room for the river, they flood the areas where the beavers are right now. But what their effects there are exactly, I don't know, because in these areas there's plenty of water already, so they don't dam as much. So they may put in dead wood and therefore maybe have an effect, but it's different compared to here. But they definitely play a role in the Room for the River project. Yeah, they're basically everywhere in the river, so yeah.
Hi, thanks. This was a great presentation, and I really love the illustrations. You answered my first question by saying, yes, you did those illustrations. They're delightful. I wonder how they evolved.
You mean my...
How did they develop? Why did you start doing these lovely beaver drawings?
So the main reason was that I was able to show you these conflicts, but I wasn't able to show you what it would look like in coexistence. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I can make a drawing of that, and then I started thinking of it as a trilogy, so the past, present, and future. So I was like, okay, I'm doing it anyway now, so if I draw the future, I might as well draw the present and the past. Yeah, and then this idea of the ecosystem contest came a bit later, but I was like, I think that could be nice to include in my presentation.
Are you going to make a book, like a children's book?
I haven't thought of that. Maybe, could be.
Hi, Britt. Thank you for that. I was just wondering how successful your mitigation sort of dike protection is, and who pays for that? Does the state pay for that?
Yeah, good question. So the mitigation, like I showed you in the drawing, I think they're still experimenting with this. So this is really a future view. They're currently experimenting with kinds of materials, also in Germany, like what to use to protect the dikes. But up until now, it's all super expensive. So I think they need to find the best material first, and then figure out what locations to prioritize, because there's no way we're going to be able to protect all our dikes. Yeah, and I think the state, up until now, is funding it, but I don't know what it will be in the future, if it's going to be on large scale. Yeah.
Is there any concern about North American beaver invasion in the Netherlands, or are they quite a ways away?
I don't think there's concern about it. I heard someone else yesterday talk about how they tried to reintroduce an American beaver in Finland, and that they found out that they do not breed with the European beaver, but they also don't really compete, I think, if I remember correctly.
I was just going to help answer the question about North American beavers. So yeah, as Britt was saying, there are North American beavers in Finland. So the first reintroductions into Europe, they didn't realise there were two separate species. They brought them in, and now they are trying to manage the North American beavers in Finland to allow the spread of the Eurasian beavers. And a while ago, I think in the 90s and early 2000s, there were some North American beavers in Central Europe, around Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, that escaped, I think, from zoos and nearby enclosures, and there's been attempts to remove those. And I think in Germany, they, because it's difficult to tell the two species apart, when they were catching up the beavers, they then identified them, and then the North American beavers, I think they were sterilising and then putting them back out, but so they couldn't breed anymore with each other, and then allow the spread of Eurasian beavers. But the two species can't interbreed at all, so there's no worry about hybridisation. I think from speaking to experts in Germany, there's no North American beavers out in continental Europe anymore, and I don't think there's any in the Netherlands, so there's no worry about that. It's mainly just Eurasian beavers now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Britt. That was incredible.